There are forces of good and forces of evil at work in the world today. What are these forces? Who is responsible for the good? And who is responsible for the evil? Richard Schaff talks about current events which are rarely discussed by the mainstream media, events that affect us all. This program seeks to identify, to inform, and to equip the believer for what's ahead. Welcome to What in the World is Going On?
This is What in the World is Going On. I'm your host, Richard Schaff. The program, sponsored by Lincoln Log Homes. We are pro-Christian, pro-American, pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, and here by the grace of God. Let us open with prayer this morning, a particularly significant day, as I feel history is being made and we're part of it. I'm taping this on Sunday, May 31st. Father, I pray that you would be with our nation, that you'd intervene, that we might be spared the judgments that might be due us. Forgive our national sins. Undergird our president. Undergird those and advise those that are around him to advise him. Be with our astronauts as they travel through space this morning. Protect them, Lord. Thank you for the discoveries. Thank you for our freedom. Thank you for our Lord. Thank you for his shed blood. In Christ's name, amen. Well, I feel the elites are going to make your life a living hell until you submit to the New World Order. The coronavirus equals tribulations. The police state, where I run, a huge success. Just look at your news. When the coronavirus landed on our shores, though, communist China came in with it. We become a part of a mass-scale human experience in government control. And it turned out that stripping away our freedom wasn't all that difficult. Under the guise of concern for our health and well-being, tyrants came out of the woodwork. Our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, and our lives are being destroyed as the left solidifies and expands their oppressive powers. We've been herded around like cattle, threatened, isolated, confined, silenced, and arrested. You name it, it's happening in America. You tell me if what follows sounds like the United States or communist China. We've been told who can work and who can't, with language that separates us according to who is and who isn't essential, as the almighty state supersedes individual rights in our family unit. We've been physically and verbally harassed, threatened, fined, detained, arrested, jailed, and are placed in forced quarantine. Business licenses have been revoked. Going to work without the permission of the government is now a crime. So is going to the park or a beach. And don't dare go to church. Children playing together is also a defiance of the government. But you see those placing flags on the graves of our veterans. This list of infraction goes on and on and on. A few examples. Stay home, don't go out, don't earn money, don't pay your bills, feed your family, maintain your credit rating, live your life. Do not make a single move without permission from the state, though, or you will be punished. Oh, and don't you dare go to church. They've been shut down, some threatened with permanent closure. Even services that maintain social distancing were not tolerated. And just yesterday I saw on television where our proud conservative Republican head of our Supreme Court, Roberts, went with the liberals when the church in California was trying to protect the constitutional rights that they have and that we have and remain open. What was his excuse? I guess that right about separation of church and state, protection of Christian rights, it doesn't apply if you've got a virus, a pandemic, a flu, or whatever, it makes a constitutional difference. What a Chief Justice he's turned out to be. But religion can't thrive in a totalitarian state, as the state must reign supreme. And we're seeing that in America today. Meanwhile, as churches are closed, jails are opened. Criminals are released en masse, including child predators, rapists, and murderers. Prisoners, wise to the ruse, are now intentionally infecting themselves so they can be released early. And boy, the left can't get enough of it. In several places, our right to protest has been stripped away as our right to promote protests. Tech tyrants are employed, shutting down social media for those trying to spread the word about peaceful gatherings. The Bill of Rights has been set on fire and tossed off the top of a skyscraper as the police state rushes in. We've been subjected to the inhuman separations, as the oldest among us are left to suffer alone in nursing homes, senior care facilities, and hospitals, where there's often an impenetrable wall of secrecy surrounding their patients. Meanwhile, contact tracing has become the next frontier to advance the police state as fascist techs gets in the act. They track down our every move. The government will hunt you down, find you, and force you and other members of your household to stay in your home even if there's no food in your house. The quarantine cycle would leave an entire household locked up for weeks and weeks on end with no end in sight, as we are essentially placed under house arrest. Strategies for how to identify people who've met in certain criteria, they've already been discussed. We'll have more on that later, perhaps at another time. But for now, brace yourself for the quarantine that's coming, and also take a dark new twist as the globalist rag warns of dark times ahead for America. More predictive programming being carried out before our own eyes. Are we preparing for a possible grid down scenario? According to one news story over at that left-wing rag, the Daily Beast, quote, "Quarantine is about to take a dark new twist," end quote. With their story warning that the combination of the arrival of summer and the hot weather that comes with it, and millions of Americans working at home due to the COVID-19 electrical grids now across our country, could be stretched beyond capacity. And the Beast story warned, brace yourself for blackouts this summer of COVID-19. Just the latest warning we've gotten this month of a powerful grid down scenario is coming to the U.S. Peter Navarro recently warned of a new threat to America that could be much more crippling to the U.S. and our economy than COVID-19 and leave America's economy in utter ruins. China taking down America's entire power grid via the electromagnetic pulse attack, or a devastating series of cyber attacks. Navarro, who's the assistant to the president and director of Trade and Manufacturing Policy and the National Defense Production Act Policy Coordinator, he recently warned of the very real possibility of war on the horizon with China. This over the virus backlash, and not surprisingly considering the evolving scenario back on May 1st. President Trump and the White House published Executive Order 13920. In that executive order, it was written to protect and secure America's entire bulk power grid system. And while we'll pray that any grid down scenario in the U.S. won't last long, because any long-lasting blackouts will bring with it nearly unimaginable consequences, possibly including up to more than 90% of the American, 90% of them being dead within the following 9 to 18 months, should it be nationwide. Most Americans are totally unaware of the total havoc that could be unleashed. With multiple warnings having come out of a grid down scenario in their future, and including President Trump and the White House putting forth a much-needed executive order to hopefully protect America power grids, this, as the website Urban Survival reported, a number of scary things which, should the grid go down long term, many things that most Americans don't even think about. Let's look about them. Let's just look at a few of them. No more supply trucks. When the supply trucks stop, no stores are going to be resupplied. It's not what matters much anyway, because most stores are going to be looted and then abandoned afterwards. We're seeing that this weekend, aren't we, folks? But this would certainly guarantee that within a few short hours of the grid going down, life will already change dramatically, because you'll no longer be able to resupply yourself and the things that you need. You see, number two, all the stores would close. As was just mentioned, without this resupply trucks coming in, stores and restaurants are most certainly going to be shut down. The only real question is, when will the looting occur? And as we're seeing, folks, it'll occur pretty quick. Commerce would cease. This is one that you're going to want to think about, folks, that a grid down situation is seriously going to lead to a complete and utter breakdown of commerce as we know it. Banks will no longer be open. ATMs won't work. And the debit and credit cards will no longer be of any use. And gasoline will be gone. That's a big one. Gasoline is going to become one of the most precious commodities once people are unable to get any more of it. Everything from cars to motorcycles to ATVs to generators, they all run off gasoline. Heaters wouldn't work. Just as the summer months are going to get really hot, really uncomfortable due to the lack of air conditioning, so will the freezing cold weather months due to the lack of heat. In fact, the lack of heat is going to be a far worse problem than lack of air conditioning. And no more running water. That's a big one. You won't be able to run the dishwasher or the washing machine. No, you won't be able to take a shower either, run the bath, water your plants, or even fill up a sink. This is why when you stockpile water, you need to stockpile both drinking water and water for other purposes. As the website Prepper Journal had already reported, should the grid go down for an extended period of time, we're still going to need the ability to cook food without electric appliances, the ability to see when it's dark, the ability to heat or cool your home or food, the ability to get water from the tap, or the ability to get information and news. And while we'll continue to pray that a war with China and Russia will be averted, as Zero Hedge has reported in a recent story, we may be headed in that direction. And if so, the electrical grids here in America would definitely be in peril should our enemies try to take down America overnight. A Reuters report claiming Beijing is already preparing for the prospect of an armed conflict with the U.S., and they've seemingly been driven and are driving the deteriorating relations between Washington and Beijing. But for conservatives who've been looking at China with a wary eye since the outbreak began, the latest escalation is hardly a surprise. When it comes to rebutting China's aggression to an audience of mostly Trump supporters, nobody in the West Wing is as practiced as Pete Navarro, which is probably why he called to deliver a warning about this newest threat, this threat from China, a threat that could potentially be even more crippling to the U.S. economy than the virus. That threat, the vulnerability of the U.S. power grid. I think that's what's most important for the American people to understand very clearly is that China lied, people died. China spawned the virus, and they hid that virus for 6 weeks, which allowed the virus to escape Wuhan and infect the rest of the world. They spent the time going forward around the world vacuuming up all the masks, a quote from Navarro. He went on to explain how President Trump's latest executive order protects America's power grid by forcing the federal government to buy and use components made only in the U.S. China poses a direct threat to the U.S. power grid, so long as components made in China and other foreign markets are used. An example of what's happening, take a look out in Washington State. Their government has promised that those who don't cooperate will contact tracers and tests and won't be allowed to leave their home. Washington State Governor Jay Inslee indicated that people who refuse to cooperate with contact tracers or refuse the virus testing won't be allowed to leave their homes, even to go to the grocery store or pharmacy. You say that's way out in Washington State. Yeah, part of the United States, you know. When it comes to contact tracing, how are you guys going to handle people or families who want to refuse to test or to self-isolate? If they want to leave their homes to get groceries, I know you said that they can't do that. How are we're going to make sure that they don't leave home? A reporter asked him. The governor replied, quote, "We'll have attached to the families a family support person who will check in with them to see what they need on a daily basis." A quote from Governor of Washington State. Continuing to quote him, "If they can't get a friend to do their grocery shopping, we will help them. We'll help them get groceries in some fashion. If they need pharmaceuticals to be picked up, we'll make sure that they get their drugs. If we're going to be there on a daily basis for them." Now that's going to help encourage them to maintain their isolation too. Get that. The government will have somebody watching over you to take care of you. Shocks you, doesn't it? The Linwood Times summarizes his remarks this way. Therefore, these individuals that refuse to cooperate with the contact tracers and or refuse testing, those individuals will not be allowed to leave their homes to purchase basic necessities such as groceries and their prescription drugs. Those persons will need to make arrangements through friends, family, or a state-provided family support personnel. Inslee announced that as the state begins to relax restrictions and open up its economy, health officials will focus on contact tracing and isolation of infected individuals with the help of over 1,300 newly trained contact tracers who began work last Friday, May 15th. Critics were quick to point out disturbing aspects of the new effort in the Evergreen State. For those refusing, those individuals that won't cooperate with contact tracers or refuse testing, they won't be allowed to leave their homes, not even to purchase basic necessities, such as groceries. There's no death penalty in Washington State for murder, tweeted civil liberties lawyer Eric Ryan. Now, Governor Inslee is claiming authority to slowly starve you if you don't conform, he added, without a trial. Scary stuff, isn't it, folks? So you'll be under house arrest without due process, and there's nothing illegal about it. Already in effect in Washington State, watch it spread. Even now, folks, a state of war is beginning to exist between China and the United States. India is slowly but surely being occupied by the Chi-Coms. China is also threatening the Philippines to the point that the Philippine president has done an about-face and is asking for the presence of the American Second Fleet to be stationed near the islands. Japan feels threatened, and China is threatening many other nations with their infrastructure products, which always turn into blackmail against the host nation. And this is leaving many countries with no option but to bend to the will of the communists. Think Hong Kong this past week, people. They had an international treaty with Great Britain. They just violated it. And what's happening? Let's watch and see. I ask you, is Taiwan next? What are we going to do if they try to take physical possession of Taiwan? Here it is in America. Social media and the Democrat Party are all part of the Chi-Com plot to destroy America's economy, its ability to wage a war. These parties seek the destruction of our present form of government. Think they're not, folks? And by the way, what do you think all this is leading to? The defeat of our president. And what do you think we've got in the wings? Have you seen him? Well, you haven't seen too much of him, but every so often he sticks his head out of his basement. Bet Biden will get along real good with the Chinese, don't you? He's already doing business with them. Well, at least his son has made a few million off of him. What do you think all of this is leading to? Discrediting our president. Yesterday we saw the 2 astronauts take off in space. Barely made any news because we were so busy covering the news of our riots. And what are those rioters? They're not just protesters. We've got a right to protest, but we don't have a right to burn down buildings. What a police officer did was, in my opinion, certainly wrong. I believe it was murder. But that does not justify us burning down police stations, setting all police cars on fire that we can get a hold of, looting stores. No, these are the activists. These mobs are left-wing controlled. In most cities, they're determining that the ones that protest are not the problem. It's those that infiltrate from out of state. Those are the terrorists. Those are the left-wingers. Those who would violently overthrow our government as we're deceived and misled that we might vote him out. Thanks to our president, though, a message has been sent to China. The bone is back on Guam. After the departure of America's B-52s, the U.S. Air Force bolsters the Pacific Line of Defense with B-1 Lancer bombers. The U.S. Air Force and the Pentagon want China to know that's not abandoned the China Sea. In fact, B-1 bombers and a carrier force are headed in harm's way. Reading some report, one would have surmised the U.S. military ran away from its war-fighting Pacific duties like frightened little girls. They thought that our carriers were in port over the COVID fears and that our B-52 buffs were abandoning Guam. Like Chicken Little warning the sky is falling, the truth is rather more punctuated to the tune of the U.S. Ronald Reagan carrier force underway to the region, and in particular B-1 Lancer bombers laden with gifts. You know what those gifts are, folks? Those B-1 bombers are carrying a belly full of stealth cruise missiles that are capable of decapitating an enemy force in minutes. The bone, as they call the B-1, is back on the island of Guam, and it's brought with it the ability to deliver up to 24 stealthy AGM-158 joint air-to-surface standoff missiles. It's now abundantly clear that the Pentagon wants to make sure that friend and foe alike are aware of the fact, based on pictures the service just posted. In other words, Uncle Sam is in your face, China, like it or not. And it's there primarily because of the determination of our president. And I don't believe that Joe Biden has the fortitude to take a similar stand. The image showcased the fact that the B-1 bomber can put even a peer state's most defended targets at risk from a standoff distance. You see, since the departure of the B-52 bomber from Guam on April 17, the Air Force has made the B-1 it's quite visible in the region, and that's included missions that were flown from bases in the continental United States. That's right, folks. That included a 32-hour flight from Ellsworth Air Force Base in South Dakota to the South China Sea and back, while earlier in April, 2 B-1s were sent from South Dakota on a 30-hour round-trip flight to Japan, where the bombers were joined by U.S. F-16s along with Japan's Air Force Defense Force. They've got some B-15s and B-2 fighters, and we did a joint training exercise with them. What underpins this new strategy is a Pentagon buzzword called, quote, dynamic force employment, end quote. Meanwhile, the U.S. Navy's 7th Fleet announced that the Independence variant littoral bomb combat ship, the USS Montgomery, and the Lewis and Clark class dry storage ship, USS Cesar Chavez, they conducted some presence operations in international waters and the airspace near the Panamanian flagship West Capella. This reported in the national interest. You see, folks, our president is carrying a big stick. They're also known in today's age as cruise missiles. At the same time, Trump has vowed to take and seek some very substantial damages from China. President Trump is vowing to seek very substantial damages from China for its part in unleashing the virus pandemic on the world. You saw Reach took us out of the World Health Organization. Yep. They and China were hand in hand. We haven't determined the final number, but it's going to be very substantial, Trump told reporters. This is he was reporting to the White House reporters at a briefing in the Rose Garden. A quote, if you look at the world, I mean, this is a worldwide damage. This is damage to the U.S. This is damage to the world, he noted. Trump was responding to a question from Germany about him sending China a $165 billion bill in repatriations for the virus damage inflicted on that country. That was from Germany. We can do something else much easier than that, Trump said. Maybe he was referring to the oft-mentioned move of merely withholding billions of U.S. debt held in bonds by China. Another quote from our president, we have ways of doing things. Germany is looking at things, and we're looking at things. We're talking about a lot more money than Germany's talking about, end quote. First, Trump vowed to complete the intelligence investigation of the Wuhan, China lab, the one that was administrating intelligence he believes accidentally leaked the COVID-19 virus. We're doing very serious investigations, as you probably know, our president said, and we're not happy with China. We're not happy with that whole situation because we could believe that it could have been stopped at the source. It could have been stopped quickly, and it wouldn't have spread all over the world. His quotes, his words. We think that that should have happened. We'll let you know at the appropriate time, but we're doing some serious investigating right now, end quote. Trump mentioned the blame without mentioning China at a recent opening of his daily briefing. Another quote, there has been so much unnecessary death in this country, it could have been stopped. It could have been stopped short, but somebody a long time ago, it seems, decided not to do it that way. And the whole world is suffering because of it. At least 184 countries are involved, noted our president. We're looking at demonic forces coming against us, satanic forces. It's not all a coincidence. It didn't all just start with a phony investigation, impeachment hearings, false claims, phony witnesses. No. Satanic forces are at work to destroy our republic, to take our president down, and to enslave us to a communistic government. I like this. I made the statement a while back that if our president discovered a cure for cancer, they'd find something wrong with it. No matter what we have. Did you see that riot up in, I think it was Minneapolis, where a CNN reporter was actually arrested? That's illegal, you know. Yeah, he was arrested. And after getting everybody's attention and seeing how a police state works and the illegal act stated, they pointed out, of course, that this is all Trump's fault. And as the riots continued, I saw on television last night where they summarized, say, take a look at Trump's America. Our president could do nothing right. Where was the glory given to our president for enacting us back into space? The very successful space launch just yesterday, hidden from most sources, hidden from our eyes. But they've got the riots, the protesters that have turned violent, our city's on fire. Do you think this is all just happening as a coincidence with pandemic and China's move against Hong Kong and in its South China Sea? Folks, this is not all happening by chance. This is all happening by deliberate actions. And the forces of hell are against our government and our president. In closing, I want to bring you something from Sean Hannity. He notes that the Dems and their media allies refuse to give President Trump credit for anything. Speaking during his opening monologue, Hannity just recently slammed the Democrat Party and their allies in the mainstream media, saying that we will never give President Trump credit for anything. We never have before, ever, seen this level of mass madness, rage, insanity, hysteria, psychosis. It's the same predictable people. Top Democrats in the media will give your president credit for absolutely nothing. A quote from Hannity. He continues, Think about this. Not the travel ban, not the historic medical mobilization, not the millions of supplies sent all over the country, not for the thousands of hospital beds that the federal government created, not the massive reduction in death prediction models. They give this president credit for absolutely nothing. Instead, they accuse him of murder. They accuse his supporters of murder. Yes, Trump gets no credit, but everything can be the blame. Think about it, folks. We've got an election coming up. What do you think they really want? They sure don't want our president reelected. They want a leftist put in there. They want Nancy Pelosi's crowd given the Senate and the White House. And God help us if they get it. We need to pray for our president, for those around him, for those advisors. We need to undergird him with our continued prayers. And incidentally, folks, in closing, let me mention, the program is sponsored by Lincoln Log Homes, Kannapolis, North Carolina. If we can be of service to you, we are pro-America. I will work with you personally. Richard Schaaf, CEO. Dial me. Toll free, 800-848-3310. But even more important, remember faithfully to uphold our president and our republic in your daily prayers. Goodbye until next week.